We watched some amazing talks of using knowledge graphs in healthcare to detect fraud, for recommendations, to give context to AI, and so on. I want to put a different question now. Can knowledge graphs help our thinking, problem solving, and creativity? And I believe yes, big time. And through this, it also can be transformative for the way we build and use other types of knowledge graphs. The next 20 minutes, I'll share some observations and ideas about using knowledge graphs for personal knowledge management. There is something unique about this topic. While with the other knowledge graphs, there's a particular niche, particular group of people who are builders or users of those systems, with knowledge graphs for personal knowledge management, it's something that to a varying degrees can bring benefit to everyone. And just very quickly, a few words about me. I've worked in various capacities in the last over 25 years, but two themes remained stable. My interest in knowledge in general and in systems. So in knowledge, it was from various angles, of course, knowledge graphs, but also from the perspective of cognition. And in both these themes, also at different scales, personal, organizational, and societal. So this would form this kind of a matrix where in these four areas, I worked extensively for the knowledge, mainly on knowledge graphs, as consultant and trainer on semantic technologies, mainly for enterprise knowledge graphs and open knowledge graphs, and in the last 3 years also personal knowledge graphs, and for the systems where I was mainly inspired by cybernetics and complexity sciences, but the work roles I appeared as a management consultant and an enterprise architect, and in two of these areas there are also books. So today's focus is, if you see that as a Venn diagram, there is this taxonomy of knowledge graphs that maybe there are several, but one that I particularly like is splitting them into open knowledge graphs, enterprise knowledge graphs, and the recent genus personal knowledge graphs on the right, and the overall area of knowledge management with a subset of personal knowledge management. There is this overlap, which will be the focus of this session. And of course, for personal knowledge graphs, there are also other kinds where they're not so much created by the user, but about the user. And especially in the academics, there is a lot of focus on that for healthcare recommender systems and so on. But personal knowledge management, it has a very interesting history. We will not have time to dive into that, but I would like to just pick one particular trend that goes historically through the centuries, and that is decoupling. So it seems this is what's going on. If we look at the history, the first technology for personal knowledge management, that's commonplace books, the books that were used to collect quotations, thoughts, observations, and so on. During the Renaissance, they underwent an interesting transformation from being something that was helping memorize to something that was actually secondary memory. So they were helping forgetting. But what was a bit more interesting is this transformation where there was a decoupling between the way the world is and the way the knowledge about the world is represented, then also how this knowledge is organized. This was basically also in parallel with all the political and artistic freedoms during the Renaissance. So that they're freeing these three parts that were rigid previously. Then another decoupling happened that was even, it's important also to see that this decoupling was always possible when there was also a technology to have cohesion about these parts that are now more autonomous. And that's an important balance. The next decoupling was actually the physical decoupling, when at some point, instead of bound books, you can take separate notes, and that was used and encouraged. And at some point, there was actually a device called Arc of Studies that was a wooden cabinet with slips that were put on hooks and sorted by different subjects, but you can detach them and use them separately. Well, this kind of usage actually moved to another level with Luhmann Zettelkasten, where the decoupling was between storage, structure, and meaning. And there is where the relationships between things took another level of importance. And now we have another decoupling between data application with personal knowledge graphs. Luhmann said Augustine is particularly interesting because it can be seen as the first personal knowledge graph, not a digital one, but still it has all the qualities to be regarded as such. To say that he was prolific would be understatement, as the figures on this slide show. And these 90,000 linked cars, also with backlinks, can easily be seen as a personal knowledge graph, but that would be at a physical level. In fact, at the logical level, it's denser, because you can see that the separate cards not as actual nodes, but they were placed to store both nodes and edges. And then in different cards, there were more nodes than the card. That was also supported by the unique system of identification, very much resembling the contemporary URIs, and so on. And here a very quick attempt to represent it using just scores and with ordered collection. But now, as it is digitalized, it will be very interesting to see it with all the details, and they're also available not just as scans but as JSON format. So that will be an interesting thing to do. As Luhmann said, the value of a node was coming actually from the network of links and backlinks. If you analyze a bit deeper how this worked, it's easy to see that it had the graph properties. What are the reasons now that we go to graphs? Like what I mentioned, the decoupling between meaning, structure, and storage, but also postponing the schema definition. That was not only quite obvious, but he admitted it in his paper describing how he used it. And the ability to traverse the graph is quite important. This comes, of course, with the benefits like the open-endedness, that you can extend the graph at any point. And you have this phenomenon, which is serendipity on demand, managed serendipity. You create something where you can be surprised and you can create new associations. You're always in interaction with your past and future self. So it's sort of a social system with a life of its own, as Luhmann said. So it's an actual collaborator, not just a tool. And then if we later on see the digital timeline of personal knowledge graphs, around 2014 is when the first papers appeared on personal knowledge graphs. And then 2019, there was a research agenda published. And it maybe at that point, the industry and the academia, they worked in parallel, the industry more focusing on knowledge graphs for personal knowledge management, basically knowledge graphs created by the user, while the academia focused on personal knowledge graphs about the user with focus on recommender systems, healthcare, and so on. But still, there are some overlaps. And something interesting happened. Just when the pandemic started, there was an explosion of personal knowledge management tools. And many of them, in one way or another, used knowledge graphs. Explosion, that was really just like the virus itself. There were just a few, and in 1 year there were about 50, some of them with thousands of users. Around them, the whole ecosystem of people that were producing videos, tips, tutorials, developers making extensions, and so on. And that continues until today. I think there are now over 100. Even today, I learned about that Google is coming with another one. Apart from this PKM, they're also now known as Tool for Thought. So the Google's one project is called Tailwind, is what I learned. The definition for personal knowledge graph that I would like to propose is quite inclusive. It's basically nothing more than changing just with one word the definition already that became sort of a standard from the book Knowledge Graphs. Having this in mind, you can say that at the same time, at the moment, everybody's using knowledge graphs, and I'll explain in what sense, but also nobody is using personal knowledge graphs. Basically, I see them as three ways. First, I call the quasi personal knowledge graphs, where you have digital nodes, but mental edges. And then the second one, proto personal knowledge graphs, where you have personal knowledge management apps. So the graph is tightly connected with the app. And the third, the PKG for decentralized and for data-centric and so on. The first way, in a way, nobody's talking about what they work with as personal knowledge graph, but when you think about it, there are bookmarks, documents, projects, emails, highlights, and they are in their own silos. But we can only work with them if they're connected. And this connection is happening in our heads. That's why we can say that everybody's work is using personal knowledge graphs, but with digital nodes and mental edges. And then the second wave that started with in 2018-19, basically with tools like Rome Research, they basically manage the data as a personal knowledge graph. And here is a representation of part of the data model where the nodes and their content are linked with properties defining the schema. It is great with data log. So, but from another point of view, it can be seen also as a hypergraph where the blocks are hyper edges. So in this example, there is a page where it contains a block, and that block refers one other page as a page reference and another as a block reference. So in that sense, it works directly as a hyper edge. Another interesting thing is you can have behavior encoded, because the content and the behavior, like executable code, they just live together. So you can have a node that takes certain script from another node and input from different nodes, and that output node creates result that would appear in different contexts. In terms of types of nodes, it could be different for different users, of course, but I personally am using an ontology which has about 300 classes and about 100 properties at the moment. But here I listed the most prominent ones, the most used, at least for me. I don't know if that would be the case for everyone. These are the use cases that could be supported for daily tasks, for projects, for research. There is also video. For research, it's particularly interesting because you can also have this knowledge synthesis using this course graph, where there could be a node that is a claim and that could be supported or checked by other nodes. Also for any other thing like presenting. Currently, I'm presenting this not from PowerPoint, but from my personal knowledge graph. So what you see as a slide and parts of it, they are different nodes, and they appear also in different contexts. But this second wave still has the knowledge graphs together with the applications. You cannot say that this is my graph and then I take different functionalities from different places. It is tight coupling. That's why I believe that the third wave, and there's already a few signs that it's starting with a lot of tools using Markdown. Markdown is, of course, not de facto standard, but it is something that allows that your content is there and you can reuse it with different applications. So it is a sign, but there's a bigger sign that certain protocols are appearing. Basically, a third wave is for decoupling applications from data, for having explicit semantics and relationships finally becoming a first-class citizen. And you see, we have somewhere here where that kind of wave is starting. So if the first wave, the quasi PKGs, they are not real PKGs. They're just our digital stuff that we connect in our heads. Then the current explosion is with personal knowledge management tools, where they're characterized by two things. The application is tightly coupled with data, but also a lot of the functionality is coming from extensions. And the new one that is now coming is for real packages, for decentralized packages, and for packages where data is decoupled from applications, fully owned by the owner, and apps are only visiting magicians. This area, this intersection by personal knowledge management and personal knowledge graphs, it can be very influential for knowledge management, but also for enterprise knowledge graphs and for open knowledge graphs. In what way? Well, decision makers, if you want to, they support your enterprise knowledge graph initiative, if they're using knowledge graphs daily for their own data, it will be much easier for them to imagine what enterprise can do for what the knowledge graphs can do for the enterprise. Then for builders just by boosting their creativity and problem solving, they could be able to create better knowledge graphs. And for users, it will be for easier onboarding. But from personal knowledge graphs, it becomes even more interesting when we go to interpersonal knowledge graphs. And that's already happening. There are protocol services like the same page that integrates data without owning it from different applications for personal knowledge management, the so-called TFT tools. But the real change will come with the right kind of protocols, because they have this particular feature that they're unreasonably sufficient, as Venkatesh Rao said. One of them now appearing is the Nosphere Protocol. And this would bring the web towards the web of thoughts. If the first web was the web where majority of people were reading, and the next one was writing, but that they were writing actually focused on the now and linearly, just seeing the flow that was coming, not connecting outside the platform and not connecting back in time and so on. We had a glimpse of what it could be with, for example, seeing Twitter as a knowledge graph, because it already has this ability to have atomic parts in it. And there was this TWAMX extension where you can experience it as a knowledge graph. So not the now flow that you see, but actually you can connect different threads easily. Yet you're in one platform. So the web of thoughts should be where the reading, writing, and weaving go together independent of platforms. I think we have about 4 minutes for questions. Thank you. There are more information, of course, that you can find in this book that's coming out next month.